Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the home organisation Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Sabrina Oktavelia. Energy-saving homes. Here's a question to consider. How much energy and money might be slipping through the cracks of your homes, quite literally? Many homeowners don't realize that small inefficiencies can add up to significant costs over time. From unnoticed drafts to outdated appliances, there's so much potential for improvement. In this episode, we'll discuss actionable steps you can take to make your home more energy efficient, prioritize upgrades that deliver the highest return on investment, and explore innovative tricks that can help reduce your carbon footprint. Introducing the guest, Kerryn Wilmot, Healthy Environments Program Lead at University of Technology, Sydney. She leads research on smart cities and healthy urban environments at ISF, focusing on sustainability, urban health, and regenerative design. She previously led the pioneering 60L Green Building Project in Melbourne, a Banksia Award-winning development that set new standards for sustainable commercial design. So amazing. Welcome to our show, Kerryn.
Thanks, Sabrina. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and what you do?
Most of my working life, I was an architect working on sustainable buildings, and that's when I worked on the 60L Green Building. More recently, I've been in academia at the University of Technology, Sydney, and we work on a whole range of projects, but there's quite a suite of work at the moment on how to upgrade homes for energy efficiency, and we're particularly looking at how to retrofit existing homes because there are so many bad performing homes in Australia, and we can see it's a massive need. So we're doing a whole lot of work to work out how to do it quickly and at scale to satisfy that need.
I see. So you're improving a lot of houses, as you're saying, you're going on a big scale and improving.
Well, yeah, we're doing research to work out how to do that because there are a lot of complexities about how to do it. How do you upgrade all of those homes tomorrow? You'll need a lot of workforce, you need a lot of knowledge. How do you do the assessments? How do you get people knowledgeable about the need to do it? How do you organise around it? Where do you get the money from for those who haven't got a lot of money? So there's a lot of questions to be answered.
I see. And in regards to making an ideally cost-saving or energy-efficient home, what do you think is the ideal house with maximum energy saving?
A well-sealed building, so that what we call the shell of the building or the envelope is well-sealed, protects against the heat and the cold, has right-sized windows that capture winter heat, winter sunshine, and block out summer sunshine. That's not too big. I think Australians tend to be far too ambitious in the scale of their homes, and that's a lot to heat and cool. So more right-sized for the needs. And I think if you've got solar on the roof, that's also helpful. Yes, and we can go into some of the detail of all of that.
Yeah, before we dive deeper into the discussion, because I am actually really interested in making my house more efficient as well, we'd like to get to know you better. So let's get into the segment we call Have You Met Kerryn? Okay, so Kerryn, what is your favorite book?
Shakespeare's Wife by Germaine Greer. So it's an historic look at the circumstances that William Shakespeare's wife might have lived in and what contribution she might have made to his life. And Germaine Greer is actually a Shakespeare scholar when she's not being an activist. So I found it fascinating both to see that side of her and to learn what she's learnt in the writing of that book.
Oh, I see. Because usually people just read what Shakespeare has written.
Yes,
That's
well, this
a really
is to
interesting
understand what
outtake.
her contribution, the wife's contribution might have been and what sort of life she might have led. It was fascinating.
Wow. Okay, next question. What movie have you enjoyed recently?
I haven't seen many movies, but I just recently binge watched the TV series Diplomat. That was the
Oh,
second series in a sort of a streaming service series. So it's an American diplomat in London. So it has all the intrigue behind the scenes and the
the
difficulty she's
politics.
facing. Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds interesting. I'd like to put that on my watch list next. Yeah. And next question. Are you listening to any podcast at the moment?
Being on a podcast, I'm ashamed to admit I'm not a podcast person. So no.
That's all right. That's all right. And do you have any role model?
A bit left field, but I really loved the story of Gertrude Bell, who's a woman, an English woman who was born in the mid to late 1800s, who did so many fabulous things. She was a mountaineer, a Persian translator, a diplomat. She sort of invented the Red Cross's tracking system to find lost soldiers during the First World War. And she ended up being part of the English army going into Baghdad at the end of the First World War and helped to set up Iraq. She was an adventurer. She went into the Arabian desert and got to know the tribes there. Like, just a fabulous array. Oh, and an archaeologist and a photographer. Yeah, like, you can't beat her. Had a fantastic life, but so skilled and talented in so many areas, and basically fighting against tradition and the way other people might have expected her to live. I mean, she had the advantage of starting off in a fairly privileged position, but she made the most of it.
Yeah. She sounds really adventurous and sounds like a really well-rounded person. And if someone ever makes a book out of her, that would be so interesting.
There is a
And
book, and then that book generated a film that stars Nicole Kidman as the character. Yeah, it's a very short version of what the book tells you, but it's available out there. I think it's called Queen of the Desert or something like that.
I'm actually quite interested. I'll look it up after this.
It's a really extraordinary woman. Oh, and that film only touches on a little bit of her story.
Only a little.
Yeah, there's a whole other history it didn't mention.
Wow, that's really inspiring as a woman.
Yeah.
And is there a course that has inspired you?
A few years ago, I did what's called Lenses training, and Lenses is an acronym meaning Living Environments in Natural, Social and Economic Systems. And it's University of Colorado developed a process for achieving regenerative development. So it was a way of working with a wide range of stakeholders to get really regenerative outcomes and a better, deeper engagement with the natural environment and a better quality construction or development as a endpoint.
I see. So that's all my questions for you for that section. And we can go and deep dive into our interview questions for the topic home improvements for maximum energy savings. So, first question for starters, right? How would you define home organization, Kerryn?
I struggled with this one. I think trying to think about what's energy relevant. My definition would be firstly administrative, paying your bills on time, managing the contracts you've got with the utilities and mortgage providers so that you're keeping your costs low, you've got the best deal possible. Another one would be placement of your equipment and appliances in the home, because particularly things like compressors outside for air conditioners and heat pump hot water and fridges inside, you can actually optimise their performance. So sort of understanding where to put things. And the other one would be the way you operate the home so that you keep the comfort, the heating and cooling comfort ideal, and you can keep the energy costs down. So
I see. So it's separated into three, right? In terms of tasks and how we put our things and how we take care of the house physically.
yes, yeah.
I see. And what features in a home contribute to energy costs?
So this depends very much on the age of the equipment that you've got, all the appliances you've got, and how you use them. But generally, it's heating and cooling takes the most energy, and then hot water heaters would be the next one. If you've got a pool pumps take a lot of energy, and fridges, especially if they're older fridges, would be the next one on the ranking. So in my discussions with you, there'll be a lot of focus on maintaining good heating and cooling conditions so that you can keep those costs down.
I see, because conditioning is usually like, especially heating and cooling, because I live in a tropical country. So for us, it's AC, air conditioners, like just to
Yes.
cool the room. It is actually one of the things that increases the bills pretty
Yes,
much.
totally.
And how would you define renewable energy?
For me, well, not for me, generally, renewable energy is generated from sources that aren't depleted over time. So that's why it's renewable. It doesn't get used up. And so that means it's from the sun and from wind and from water. Could include hydro, pumped hydro, tidal energy, obviously solar, photovoltaics, and wind turbines.
I see. And what are some advantages of renewable energy compared to non-renewable energy that we currently are using in this world?
Yeah, well, firstly, they don't run out. And then they don't cause harm to the environment because the sources, the sun, wind and water, are already in the environment. Once the infrastructure is in place, they cost a lot less to run than fossil fuel and nuclear sources because you don't have to keep buying in the fuel source. And yeah, they're a lot more cost efficient. Getting rid of gas is a really significant improvement to your health, particularly the ones inside the home, like heaters and stovetops. They've been found to contribute to health problems like childhood asthma. So if you get rid of gas, using it all electric instead, it's much better for your health.
Is it including for our stove as well, the gas stove?
Yeah, very much. In fact,
I see.
that's quite a significant contributor.
I'd like to add an additional question to that. Like in Australia, what type of renewable energies are you guys pursuing as of now?
Australia's got one of the highest levels of rooftop solar. So putting photovoltaics on the roof is a really significant thing in Australia. We've got so much sun, and there's a good market of installers and products out there. So photovoltaics is the most significant one for the householders. In terms of feeding into the grid, there's a lot of solar, but bigger scale solar and commercial scale and solar farms. But there's also an increasing level of wind energy coming in as well. Traditionally, we've had some hydropower. Tasmania, one of our states in particular, has a lot of hydropower, and there's increasing discussion and use of the idea of pumped hydro. So there's a very big project on the Snowy River Dam to turn that into pumped hydro, because that's saying when the energy's plentiful, like in the middle of the day when we've got a lot of sunshine, you can pump the water up to the dam and then and hold it until you need energy when it's not easily available, and then you can use the hydropower. You let the water fall down and run the turbines. So that it's like a battery, except it's more natural. So it's a way of storing solar, for example, taking the middle of the day solar energy and storing it till you need it overnight. That's the way it works. So there's pumped hydro is becoming more prevalent. It's still in early stages.
I see. But what about solar panels during the winter time? Is it as efficient, or can you tell me more about that? Or
They're not as efficient. You don't get quite so much out of it, but they're not bad. If the things that affect the efficiency are more when clouds go over or shading from trees or from adjacent buildings. So as long as you've got a fairly bright sky, they're not too bad. Even in winter in Australia, in most areas in Australia, you can still get you can get something out of it that's a useful contribution.
I see. And what are some examples of renewable energy home improvements that pay off in the long run, Kerryn?
Well, the first thing is to fully electrify the house, because if you've got electricity and gas, you'll notice on your energy bills, each of your energy bills has got two parts. One is a supply charge, the cost of connecting that fuel to your home, and the other is the usage charge, how much electricity or gas you used over the period of the bill. If you've got both electricity and gas, you're paying two supply charges. So if you can convert whatever you had as gas into electricity, like change your stove to an electric stovetop, then you've only got to pay one electricity bill, not the two bills. So you've only got the supply charges for the electricity. So that's an instant cost saving. And in Australia, the cost of gas is going up all the time. So there's the other side of the advantage for that. Then if you're going to put solar on your roof, if everything's electrified, it all has the potential to be run off your own supply, off your PVs, which it's much more cost effective for you to use your own solar than it is to try and export it to the grid. So the more you can run off your own solar, to use up all of what you produce, the better. So if everything in your house is electrical, then you've got the best possible potential to do that. If you've got PVs, if you've got solar, then the next good thing to do is to change any use of your appliances to match when you're maximising the output of your solar, which is obviously in the middle of the day. So for things that have got presets on them, like pool pumps and hot water services that run automatically, change the timer to run when you've got the most solar coming into the house. So rather than have lots in the day, nothing's happening at home, you try to feed it into the grid. You get very small income, very small feed-in tariffs. So you don't get a lot of money back from that. Whereas the things that you can use that use energy, if you connect them during that time, it soaks it all up. You get the advantage of it, saves you a lot more money that way. And then there are a whole lot of things that are more manual operation. You choose when to do them. So things like dishwashers and washing machines, I think some of them nowadays have got timers, but even when they don't, put them on during the day, not like after dinner. Sometimes people put the dishwasher on after dinner. If you can wait till the morning, put them on as you're leaving home to go to school or work, then it's using daytime solar power. So rather than nighttime high cost power. So it's that maximising the amount of your own solar that you use.
Of utilizing the solar. And as we have been talking about solar and hydro pumps, what role do other home improvements such as insulation and ventilation play in cutting energy costs besides utilizing these renewable energy?
They play a huge part, because the cheapest and the best renewable energy is the stuff you don't use. So the more you can make your house more efficient, the less energy you have to put in to make it operate. So particularly if you can improve the thermal comfort, that is, keeping you warm in winter and cool in summer, that has benefits in not only saving you in energy costs, but it also should make you feel more comfortable, obviously. And it's also better for your health. There's some good studies. We did one in the last few years that really demonstrated significant health benefits for having a warm house in winter. So it's you win all round if you've got a more comfortable house. And also, a well-designed and well-built home should be able to retain those comfort conditions with very little energy input. So, for example, if there's a power outage and you've got a well-built house, it's probable that you can last a couple of days without feeling particularly uncomfortable. But a poorly built house, you'll either roast or freeze within a short period of time. So there's lots of reasons to make it perform well. So starting off with the improvements that can help thermal comfort, the first best thing you can do that's the cheapest and easiest to do is to draft proof the house. So if you can feel where the cold drafts are coming from and block them up, that's what you need to do. So whether it's around doors and windows, any unused vents, chimneys that aren't used, gaps in walls and floors. And there are a lot of products around that you can use to do that. But I caution that if you do that, you have to have the house well ventilated, because you don't want a build-up of condensation and mould and any of the off-gassing, the sort of poisons that build up in the house. So you use your exhaust fan in the bathroom, you use your range hood over the stove, open the windows and flush it out whenever the outside conditions are comfortable. If you want to get fancy, there's something called heat recovery ventilation, where you can put in something that vents out the stale air, but it has a heat exchanger in it to capture the heat or the cool that's already in the house, so that you're not actually just replacing the nice, comfortable indoor air with cold or hot outdoor air. So there's a special bit of equipment that you can use that's more sophisticated and probably not so much of a retrofit thing. So you do need to keep the ventilation going, but having it draft proofed is really the best thing you can do to start with. The next thing would be to have it well insulated. You've mentioned insulation. Lots of Australian homes have got insulation now, but if you haven't got it or it's really old, do consider putting it in or refreshing it. So when it's old, it gets dusty, it squishes down and gets more compact, probably got animal droppings in it if you've got a big roof space. All of that makes it perform worse. So you do need to take out really old, dusty insulation and put in fresh stuff. It needs to be, if it's the fluffy stuff, it's the height of the fluffiness and the fluffiness of it that gives you the benefit of the insulation. So that's when it compacts, it loses its benefits. So insulation is important. The next one is the windows, how they perform. So in terms of retrofits, in winter, what you're trying to do is stop your nice, warm, cosy heater air getting out to the cold. So you're trying to block the air from hitting the glass. So if you've got heavy drapes that you pull down, particularly on a winter's evening, that helps to keep the heating in winter. And in summer, you don't want to stop that extreme sunlight coming in, so you want to shade the windows. So you can pull your blinds or pull your curtains, but if you can block it before it hits the glass, that's even better. So awnings, overhangs, a tree that shades the window, some way to stop the heat even getting to the glass in the first place is the better outcome. But if you can't do that, having an internal blind is certainly helpful. And you pull that down at times when the sun would be hitting that window. The next thing you can do is the best heating and cooling device is a reverse cycle air conditioner. So you get heating and cooling out of the same one. And that's the most efficient way to do heating in Australia. So totally recommend that. Replace particularly a gas heater, but any old inefficient heaters, any resistive electric heaters are very inefficient. Reverse cycle air conditioners, good, but you do need to right size it. So not too big, not too small. That means getting good advice. And if you've got the draft proofing and the insulation and you're operating the windows well, you probably will find you could make do with a slightly smaller system than if you're just trying to do everything by putting in the air conditioner, because obviously the house is performing better to start with. So how to get good advice about the right size for the system. Another good thing to do is put in ceiling fans. So just a nice sweep fan that helps to move the air around is really good for cooling in summer, uses a lot less energy before you even need to put the air conditioner on. If you're coming from a tropical climate, you'll know the benefit of having moving air.
It's really good.
Yeah. And another possible thing you could do as a retrofit is there's some fairly new, as in just a few years old, product on the market, quite a few different suppliers, which is a thermal coating you can put on your roof. It's like a paint you can put on the roof that's particularly designed to stop the heat being absorbed in the roof. And if you can keep your roof cool, it's a bit like the windows, the more you can keep the heat out of getting into the building envelope, the less it's going to seep down and heat up the inside of your house. So these thermal roof coatings are worth considering. They were all about heating and cooling. Other things you can do to save on energy costs. I mentioned earlier hot water systems. Put in a heat pump hot water system. It's like your fridge, but the other way around. So the fridge puts out heat in order to keep inside cold. A heat pump hot water system pulls in heat from the air to heat up the water, and it's super efficient, much more efficient than everything else. They do tend to cost a little bit more, and you'd need some space outside to put it. So, for example, people who live in flats will possibly find that they haven't got the space to put it. But if you've got the room to put it, it's worth doing. And there is a caution, though, that there's very poor advice in the industry that a lot of the installers who would do it have either had bad experiences with really early models, or they don't really understand it. So make sure you're getting good advice. The other side of this is when a hot water system fails, that's the thing that people are least prepared to do without. It's sort of panic stations. I've got to replace it within the next day, or no one in the family wants cold showers. Now, I understand in Indonesia there's very little hot water. You tend not to need it so much given the climate, but in Australia everybody's got it. And what happens is it's an emergency situation. So you just call the plumber and you say, replace my hot water, and people tend to put in a new one that matches the old one, replace like for like. That sometimes means that you've got an old gas hot water system or even an inefficient electric one, and you're not getting the best possible replacement. So another piece of advice is be prepared. Know when the end of the product life is coming up. I know my hot water system's a bit old. It's going to fail soon. Do your research now so that when the failure happens, you know exactly what you want to put in its place, and you're not having to just rely on what the plumber says he can get one from the supply shop very easily. Here's what I'm going to put in for you. Okay, that'll do. If you've already done your research and you know what to replace the hot water system with. Another thing is to make sure that most of your lighting is LED lighting. So that's the light emitting diodes. And so many lights that you buy now are LEDs. They're very readily available on the market. If you've got downlights, particularly if you've got halogen downlights, what used to be called low voltage downlights, you can easily replace them with LEDs. And if you're using downlights, use ones with an IC rating, because that means that they either haven't got a hole in the ceiling or you can put the insulation over the top, because the normal way to install insulation around downlights is you have to keep it back from the lights so it doesn't overheat. But that leaves a hole for the heat that fails, means the insulation fails. So you want to be able to put insulation over the top. So you need IC ratings for the LED downlights.
I see.
Yes. If we talked about electrification, and if you've got solar, you could also think about adding in a battery. So they're quite expensive at the moment. It's still not something that's going to be common, but the costs will come down, and that's a possibility. And also people are starting to think about, if it's particularly in single homes, EV charging, electric vehicle charging stations. And if you've got your own solar, that's a good way of using your solar efficiently. Yes, yeah. And then the other thing you can do is check that you've got the best possible tariff, so you're not paying too much. Perhaps on an annual basis, you go back to your electricity supplier and you say, have you got any better deals? And go and check with a couple of others and make sure you're always on the best deals. There's something called a time of use tariff, which basically charges you a different amount at different times of the day. If you can get a time of use tariff that matches when you need to use your energy, that's the best possible outcome.
I see.
At the moment, in Australia, a lot of those cheaper tariffs are the overnight, but over time they're going to change to being the middle of the day. So it's about what I was saying before, that's when solar is plentiful, and we're going to want to encourage people to use the energy in the middle of the day. So eventually time of use will match that pattern of use. So it's not just how much energy you use, but when you use it is important.
I see. As we mentioned before, there's actually a lot of different ways that we can do to make our home even more efficient, starting from draft proofing, the heating and the cooling, all the way to the plumbing and how we should take care of our heater and how we maximize even the usage of our electricity itself. And you mentioned that, is it something that's negotiable for you to ask regarding electricity there in Australia? Or
Yes, so it's what's called contestable, so that you can go to whichever retail provider you want. So you can ring around a whole lot of different, well, go online and check out different tariffs and find out who's offering what. They're offered quite, the different amounts at different times of the day and different amounts depending on the quantity you use. But you can check it. What happens is people get one to start with and then they don't ever check it, and the tariff will go up over time and you're not getting the best deal in the marketplace.
That's right.
Sort of through laziness. You can't be bothered going through the hassle, but it is worth doing it because you sometimes can save good amounts of money doing that.
I see. So you can ring up the other companies that provides electricity to your house. That's actually quite interesting to hear. Wow. And regarding the house improvements that we have mentioned, is for people who actually have homes and are able to do these major changes, like making these draft proof improvements and changing the gas into electricity. And a lot of these actually requires hammering and just restructuring and renovating the house, right? But for those who may not be ready to invest, and or renters who may be unable to make permanent or changes that are damaging to the property, what are some simple and effective ways that we can do for home improvements and energy efficient upgrades that can be considered?
Draft proofing is a low cost and high impact action you can take, and even a renter can find ways to block some of the gaps, even just a door snake, those sort of cloth rolls that you can put across the bottom of a door to stop those.
It's very cheap.
Yeah, exactly. Or even if you're really desperate, a rolled up towel. There's different ways of blocking the things. The cost of buying the stuff that you put on is not high. So if you've got a little bit of cash available to you, even purchasing the door seals that can screw onto the bottom of a door, or the seals that run around the outside of a door or a window, it's not a high cost, and I would be surprised if any landlord would think that's a problem. So maybe you can just tape some things over vents and stuff that's where the drafts are coming from. But still remembering to do the proper ventilation when you have blocked up the drafts. Using the window covering, so you should have curtains and blinds in the home, so making sure that you use them at the right time of day to bring in the sun when you want it and block it when you don't want it. Additionally, you can do things like stick bubble wrap over the glass. That's kind of like a hack to get you the same effect as double glazing. It's not a great look, and it means that you've got a bubbly effect through your window, but if it's a really cold or a really hot house, that could help you just give you a little bit of benefit. And in summer, some way of shading the windows outside. If you've got access to the windows, if you can put some sort of shading up. And I guess if you're really desperate, like a renter that's got no extra money, even sticking a piece of cardboard over the glass for the times of day on really hot days when the sun's coming over. You don't leave it there all the time. You want a bit of daylight in there. But perhaps for a few of the really hot days, you might stick cardboard over the window, or even if you've got a little garden outside, you might be able to plant a shrub that casts some shade over the windows. So any way to stop the sun coming in. And then in summer, when the temperature outside drops below the temperature inside the home, open up as many doors and windows as you can to flush the heat out. So this is being an active occupant. You can take advantage of the differences in temperature, and that will improve the comfort of the home. And you can do that with it. Means that you don't have to have quite as much cost on the air conditioning to maintain your comfort. The other thing is to zone the house. So what you need to do is close the doors to any rooms that you're not using. So rather than heating up the whole house in winter or cooling it down in winter, like during the day you close the bedroom doors, and when you're going to sleep at night you close off the living room, try and separate them so that you're only heating and cooling the space that you're occupying. So hopefully there's doors that do all of that. If you're a homeowner that only is prepared to do a small amount of an intervention, you might be able to install a door like at the beginning of a corridor that goes into a whole wing where the bedrooms are, or hang a heavy drape, like sort of in an old-fashioned boudoir sort of effect, where you can block any way that you can block the flow of heat and cools so that you limit the amount that you're heating and cooling. And a bit like that, you don't use energy when you don't need to. So turn off the lights in the rooms that you're not using, turn off appliances that you're not using, turn them off at the power point, because so many things nowadays have got standby power, and that's always this constant little draw of electricity. So turning off the television or whatever your music system is at the power point stops the standby, and that stops the power draw. For drying your clothes, use a clothesline or a clothes rack rather than the dryer. So that's obviously when it's really humid, that's a little bit trickier. But in most cases in Australia, you can get a pretty good effect from just hanging them out to let the air do the work. And the other thing is to remove extra fridges. The Australians have got a habit, particularly when they upgrade their fridge, to keep the old fridge, put it in the garage or on the back porch and call it the beer fridge. It's the fridge you keep all the drinks in, particularly at party time. But those fridges, especially when they're the old ones, are really high consumers. They're energy hungry. And so if you don't really need it, absolutely get rid of it. If you only use it at party times, just turn it on ready to cool for when the party's happening, and then turn it off the rest of the time. So that's another good little hack. So a lot of them are activities rather than changes, but it's the same principle of managing where the heat is and trying to keep your comfort. And then don't use energy when you don't need to.
I really love your explanations, especially in the home renovations, all the way to these tips and tricks that people can do. So people with different types of budgets can actually listen to your tricks and recommendations to do these changes around the house. And I'd like to touch base back on the electricity bit. because as we go further in this world, we get more technologically advanced and attached. And so the usage of household appliances, such as dryers and refrigerators that we have mentioned a little bit just now, contributes a lot to our energy bill. And what's the importance of purchasing the right appliances with a high energy rating?
Oh, really important. I think you should go for the most energy efficient one that you can find and that you can afford. In Australia, we've got an energy rating label, so it's got a number of stars on the label for
Yeah,
most of the appliances you buy, and so use the stars to guide you. And they also on the label indicate what the annual energy consumption is for sort of normal usage of that appliance. So you can compare between different appliances and get a sense of how much it would cost you to run it. So I would highly recommend keeping that in mind when you're buying your appliances. And it does affect your energy costs, but it does depend on how you
I see.
use the appliance. Obviously, like if you've got the spare fridge and you turn it off when you don't need it, or
Yeah.
if you've got a well-performing house and you don't need the air conditioner on very often, they affect how much energy you're using and therefore how much it costs. But at least start with the most efficient appliance and you've got your best chance.
I see. And to what extent does this appliances affect our overall energy costs?
Well, like I said, it depends how you use them and whether you've got your own solar to power them. And therefore,
Ah.
you might not mind that it's inefficient because you're just going to draw down on your own solar power. But
Mm-hmm.
generally, I think they do affect your costs, but the label will give you indications of what that cost might be so that you can compare different appliances.
For our homes, right, as we move forward as well, we are moving into smart home technology. And products are those type of products that are smart, are growing in popularity, like smart lamps, smart homes, smart fridges. And in what ways can they be used to improve energy efficiency at home?
Um, they make it easier to monitor how much energy you're using. So when you've got that information, you can act on it. You can see what, particularly the energy monitoring systems, there's home energy management systems, there's quite a few different devices that will monitor overall how much the house is using. So you can get a sense of how much energy is being used at what time, therefore what tariff
Mm.
to get, or whether you can change the timing of your energy use to match better the solar or your tariffs. And also you can, sometimes it's quite surprising to people just how much energy any appliance uses. So if you can see this, it can affect the way you operate, the way you manage your home energy use. I didn't realise having 6 million lights on in the evening was going to draw so much power. Perhaps I can turn a few
Mm.
off, that sort of thinking. Um, so also when you've got solar, you can see when you're generating the most power and schedule things like your dishwasher and your washing machine to take best advantage of that solar import. And also the rescheduling of your pool pumps and your hot water service to operate in the middle of the day. And you can monitor that. In terms of the other appliances, some of them do allow for example, air conditioners. There's some that allow for external operation. So there are programs in Australia, Queensland's got a couple of programs that allow you to sign up with the energy retailer or the distributor so that they can manage your air conditioner to help them manage the grid loads. So if you sign up to the program, you get the ability to say yes or no. They might offer you incentives to turn the temperature down a little bit in the middle of the day,
Ah.
or they might be able, you have signed up to agree to this, they can reach in and make that adjustment for you. So it helps to, when there's peak load on the grid, when everybody's trying to use power at the same time, like on a hot summer afternoon, that can put a lot of stress
Yeah.
on the whole grid. And it's those peak times that dictate the poles and wires, how much the energy companies have to build the infrastructure to supply all of that need. If we can keep that peak down a little bit, that means we have to put less infrastructure in, which means our supply charges are reduced or at least contained, because we all end up paying for it. So if it's the peak load that determines the size of the infrastructure. So what we're trying to do is manage that peak load, and afternoon use of air conditioners is one of the biggest additions to that peak and the easiest one to control. So sometimes just turning down by a couple of degrees saves you energy and also takes the stress off the grid. So that's a significant part of the whole smart appliance story. Other things like lamps and fridges and things, I'd imagine, I'm not familiar with them, but I'd imagine you can perhaps put them onto apps and you can control remotely. Perhaps you times things go on and off, get an understanding of how much energy they're using, those sorts of things.
I see. So, more to checking on how our usage is and controlling our usages, especially on the peak hours, which is a hot afternoon where we use our AC the most.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And we did talk a lot about some practices and habits that we do throughout the podcast. And what do you think, what practices and habits would you recommend practicing to reduce household energy costs?
So, as you said, we've covered them, but just to summarise the key activities, the key measures, one is just turn things off. Don't use things unnecessarily. So whether that's lights, heaters, cooling systems, dryers, standby lights. Another is that zoning, only heat or cool areas of the house that you're occupying and shut down, block off the rest of the house. Operating the windows and the ventilation, so blocking summer sun coming in, bringing in some winter sun, shutting down the house when it's the extreme temperatures outside, so you're not you close the window and keep the doors shut when it's either really hot or really cold outside, but opening it up when the outside conditions are nice so that you can flush the house out and settle the conditions down to being more comfortable. Time the appliance, the time when you use appliances to match the tariffs you're paying and when you've got solar available. So middle of the day is ideal. Reset timers, do your manual operation in the middle of the day. Get the best energy tariffs, go and hassle your utilities. Yeah, I think they're the key ones really.
Yeah. And those are actually things that are actionable that we can do right now. Some of them maybe it takes a little bit more time. And would you recommend this practice to everyone who's listening?
Of course. We can all do with lower energy bills, and most of them are easy to do. When you understand how a building operates and why things might be uncomfortable, it's a lot easier to take action to help.
So let's go to the next segment. We call it open mic, where you are able to talk about anything that you are passionate about or not related to the topic at all. And it can also be related to the topic. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. I thought I'd talk about the design of the home for energy efficiency. So it's highly related to our topic. It's not going off topic, but we can really get a lot of benefits if we're building new or undertaking a major renovation. So there's things that are really hard to retrofit but makes such a difference to how well the house performs and how much energy it uses. So the first thing to do is to get the orientation right, where the windows in the main living spaces are facing, so that it makes it a lot easier for example, to block the summer sun. You don't want big windows facing east and west because that's when the sun is coming in horizontally and it's really hard to shade those. Whereas if they're facing north, it's easier to put a little overhang and that blocks the summer sun. So you're taking advantage of the fact that summer sun is high in facing north in the middle of the day, but it's low in winter so that you can have an overhang that shields the window in summer, but the sun will come in underneath that in winter so that you get the benefits. East and west is much harder to manage. So getting your orientation right makes a massive difference to the way the house feels. And also getting some sun in winter makes it so much more cheerful. It's easy to sort of feel a bit low in winter, especially if the house is dark.
Indeed.
So also if you get that right, if you get the building envelope right, I talked before about having a really well-designed and well-built building envelope. If you get that right, it will feel so much more comfortable. And things like the size of the windows can be a lot smaller because you need to capture less sun in summer. Just need it big enough to see the views and get the daylight in. There's a type of way of measuring the house called passive house. It comes from Europe and it's now taking off in Australia. So it's a sort of a standard that you need to meet about the energy efficiency of the house. And they're looking for a really well-insulated, really solidly built building envelope with right-sized windows, fairly small, and they give you an energy budget and you have to be able to design a house that can operate within that amount of energy every year. And that people who've done it just say it's so much more comfortable. They can live in really good comfort conditions with very little energy input for heating and cooling. So in the design stage, also right-sizing the house. Very large rooms, very high ceilings take an awful lot of energy to keep comfortable. And so if you can rethink where the space is and just only put in what you need. Australians have a habit of wanting to impress everybody, so it has to be big and grand, but that's going to cost you a lot in energy. So you need to think about that one. Also design it for cross ventilation. So if you've got windows and doors on opposite sides of the house, so you can get an airflow right through the house at times when the outside conditions are comfortable, that helps you to maintain the energy, maintain the comfort conditions without needing to put in heating and cooling separately. But too many places, they only have windows, openable windows on one side, particularly in flats. They can be really hard. Apartments, because they're just a couple of windows on one side and it's really hard to generate that cross flow. So think about how to get the energy to flow, the air to flow through the house. And that well-insulated, well-sealed envelope. So when you're building the house, make sure that there's enough insulation in there and that it's well-designed to not have drafts. Thermal mass is basically it's concrete masonry, so the sort of materials that hold the heat. So like if you're on a hot summer's evening and after it's got a bit dark, if you're walking along the street and you'll feel a brick wall radiating heat out onto you, even though there's no heat source. It's because it's absorbed all the summer sun that's fallen on it. It's that effect. So, for example, concrete floors that allow some of the winter sun to fall on the concrete floor can absorb that warmth and re-radiate it for much after the sun's moved on. You get the benefit. So having that thermal mass in the home could be in the internal walls, could be the floor, could be everything. And if you can't have thermal mass, absolutely, the well-insulated envelope. A light-coloured roof. So Australians are terrible at doing black roofs, and that just absorbs all that summer heat and makes it really uncomfortable. And light-coloured roofs have a really good benefit for keeping the heat out in summer. So you've got less of a cooling load, less need to rely on the cooler if you've got a light-coloured roof. just get the colour right to start with. Then you don't have to worry about the thermal coatings that I talked about before. But even thermal coatings on light coloured roofs is even better. Reduce the hard reflective surfaces around the property. So if you've got landscaping that's got trees and soft things, because then it doesn't reflect the heat into the house. If you've got hard paving, particularly if it's dark coloured, that's just going to reflect the heat in, and that's more that you have to then get rid of through the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Double glazing, it's expensive, so it's low on the priority list, but there is a benefit from having double glazing in your windows, or higher performing glass. There's different sorts of glasses that cost more, but they help with managing the heat flow through the window. There's something called thermal breaks. So heat flows well through metal, or when you've got hard things butted against each other, the heat can flow in and out. So if you can stop that heat flow, it's another way of blocking the loss of heat in winter and the heat gain in summer. The worst thing that does this is aluminium framed windows, because that's, if you've got really high performing glass, but then you've got the aluminium frame, that's where the heat can come through easily. You can often touch a window frame inside, and you can feel the heat from outside.
It's so hot.
There are fancy window frames that are built specially with a break, an insulator bit in the middle of them to stop that heat flow. But there are all sorts of ways in the construction of the building you can stop that heat flow as well. The ways of building the roof and the ceiling, sometimes with the wall construction, you can separate in clever ways to stop the heat coming through. So build in thermal breaks. And a funny little one is, think about where you're going to place the fridge. If you can place it in a way that you can vent to outside, because fridges put out a lot of heat. So against an outside wall or somewhere where you can get a vent to take out through the roof, that's really helpful. And it's worth noting that in Australia, a house has to be rated out of 10 stars. So it's often referred to as a NATAS rating or an energy efficient rating. And it's in the building regulations, the minimum standard it has to achieve. At the moment, depending which state you're in, it's 6 or 7 stars. But sometimes people selling housing tell you that it's 7 stars as if that's something fantastic. That's only the minimum standard. The higher number of stars you get, the better. And if you can get up to 7.5 or 8, that's ideal. So aim for as higher a star rating as you can, and don't get tricked by being told that 7 is extra good. It's just minimum.
Okay.
So there's a few pointers for you.
Yeah, that's actually a lot of pointers for us to do, not just home renovations, actually creating our homes into something that's energy efficient. And if our listeners want to find out more about you, Kerryn, where should they go?
I have a profile on the UTS website, so you can search for my name against UTS. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
Yeah. And thank you very much once again, Kerryn, because you have given us such an in-depth understanding on how to improve our home in different ways, in the small tips and tricks, big major renovations, up to creating, especially for people who hasn't even owned homes yet, right? And for everyone else who's listening, thank you very much for joining and tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organisation Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.